names and all that, I would like to welcome you all for, and if you can make like a quick introduction on who you are and what's your role in the company that you're doing, just something that is like a couple of minutes, and then after that we'll jump into the main conversation. So let's start. In my screen, I have some order. So let's start with Tere Alvarez Canida. Welcome. Please go ahead with your introduction.
Thank you, Jorge, and thank you to Latino Leaders Magazine for putting this on, and to all the Latinos and everyone out there. Our heart goes out to those people that have been suffering personally, health-wise, economically-wise, and we're behind you. A little bit of my career, I founded a money management firm called Tapper Canada back in '85. Fast forward, we did primarily institutional management, sold the business in 2008. I had two partners who sold the business in 2008. The business today is owned by Bank of Montreal. In 2016, I left TCH, or Tapper Canada Hayback. I retired, and I started a family office. We have a multi-family office. I am principal and portfolio manager. My son, Brian Canada, who's an attorney, is president, and we manage assets for about 7 families.
All right, excellent. We just a quick note. We've been knowing Tere for many years. Since we participated together in the New America Alliance a long time ago, and we know on her long experience on that. Second, I have Maria Rivas, who is a great surprise to have you, Maria, with us. We also have been following you through some interviews and features in our magazine, and we are very proud to do that. So please go ahead with your introduction.
Sure, it's a pleasure to be here, Jorge, with a distinguished company. I'm a physician by training, but I have been in pharmaceuticals for 20 years as an executive. I'm currently a chief medical officer at Merk, KGaD, or EMD Soreno, as it's known in the US. I'm actually also an experienced board member. I was a board director at Tere, a technology company. And happy to be here again and talk about career challenges and career achievements for women. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. And I know that right now all these companies are under a lot of scrutiny and a lot of fellowship, because you and all the health industry are the ones who are going to help us to get out of this mess that this virus has created among us. But hopefully we have good leaders doing that. So thank you, Maria, for joining us. Then let's go very fast with Maria Echaveste. Maria is also a long-term admired Latina leader that here in Latino Leaders we have followed for some years and in different stages of her career. And now we understand that in Cadiz you are leading a very, very interesting project, Maria. So first of all, congratulations on that. And second, welcome.
My pleasure. Let me just say a couple of things. So as Jorge noted, I've had a very varied career, everything from public positions in the Clinton administration at the Department of Labor, but I'm also an attorney, so I've been in private practice for a number of years. I'm currently running something called the Opportunity Institute, which is a nonprofit focused on social economic mobility, especially educational equity, which we are seeing right now, all the inequities in our country. But about a year ago, I joined the board of directors of Cadiz Water Company, Cadiz Company, which owns agricultural land in the Mojave Desert, but also which sits on top of a very important aquifer that if you live in California or you are familiar with our issues in California, water is a very important.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I agreed to join the board is that I've had a long-standing interest in food production, helped start the Berkeley Food Institute which at UC Berkeley, because food and water are essential. And I'm too much of an apocalyptic reader to not worry about how we get water and food to people. So it's been a very interesting, as I said, it's been a year, and it involves both the hard issues of production, but also getting governmental permission to run pipelines. So it brings all those past experiences. So it's been very, very interesting, and I'm very excited to be a part of the company.
Well, that's great, Maria. Thank you for sharing that with us. And as I said, being many roles and many functions. So thank you. And we also have as our fourth participant, Consuelo Valverde, whom I talked very recently in a very interesting chat. She's in the Bay Area of San Francisco, California, and she is one of the few Latinas that are, as Tere is, in the financial world, in the investment world. And I think our company has done also some very good steps into creating wealth and creating investments. So, Consuelo, thank you for joining us, and please go ahead.
Hi, Jorge. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for all the panelists. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And well, I have my background. I'm an engineer, originally from Mexico, and half Cuban, half Mexican. Moved to San Francisco almost 15 years ago. And I've been my career, I've been also in the public sector, like Maria, and in the private sector, but I started my professional life as a tech entrepreneur when I moved back to Mexico from college from the US, and I couldn't find a job as a women engineer and electrical engineer, so I had to create my own job, and I started a PC manufacturing company back then. And then I have founded other tech companies and also been in the government sector. I think there's an echo, but I don't know if it's on my side. Can everyone hear well?
Yeah, I think someone, why don't we try to mute ourselves while we are not talking to see if we can avoid that noise.
Okay, let's
Is it better?
Yes,
okay.
It was a bit distracting. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the public sector, I had the opportunity to create the Office of Innovation, Science and Technology in Morelos, Mexico, which is a state that has the largest concentration of research centers outside Mexico City. Kind of that's where I got like a deep interest in into investing in potential opportunities out of the science and space, particularly life sciences in Mexico. So that's kind of where my most recent venture, which is SB LATAM Capital, comes from. And we're early stage venture capital firm that I founded in 2013 here in San Francisco to invest in science and technology enabled startups to transform society's environment and health on a global scale. Our geographic focus is Latin America, which means we invest in entrepreneurs that are either coming from Latin America or expanding to Latin America, not necessarily from the US, it could be from other emerging countries, which we have done, like India to Latin America. We have done over 20 investments so far in these three pillars that we invest in, includes food tech, which is a lab-grown bluefin tuna. We have fintech, like a online banking platform for SMEs in Spanish-speaking Latin America. We also invested in probably one of Mexico's first, that is on track to be one of Mexico's first unicorns, which is PayClip, a mobile payments platform as well. We have done several investments also in the biotech space, and one recently very linked to COVID-19, which is in that targets ARDS. So in a nutshell, I think that's where we are now. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you, Consuelo. Thank you for your introduction. So I want to start with the discussion and from this point of view. You know, our bread and butter for this company and for me, the last 30 years of my career, has been doing interviews with leaders. And for me, has been a terrific journey, a wonderful experience. I have learned a lot. I have compared a lot. I have made analysis. And one of the things that constantly comes to my mind every year when we are, doing this edition of Latinas is that for me, the Latina leadership is a little bit more complex and more wholesome, if you will. It's more round than the Latino or the male leadership. In what sense? And let me explain myself, because I don't want to be like gendered biased. But when we understand the path of many Latinas, we understand that they have grown, they have become, of course, daughters and sisters of someone, and then they become wives of someone, maybe sometimes, or fiancés or girlfriends of someone, or spouses of someone, and then they become mothers, but they still being sisters and daughters. And besides that, which is complex by itself, they have their own careers. And their own careers are as demanding and as complex as a male or leadership career could be. On the other side, men, is not that I want to diminish the merit, because of course I'm a man and I'm a man, and I don't want to see myself like lesser, but I understand that our role might be a little bit simpler, because especially in the Latino culture, we're educated when it comes to say, okay, you need to pursue a profession, you need to be devoted to that, and then sometimes you will have a wife or a spouse that will take care of all the other personal things, whereas maybe Latinas don't have that privilege. So I will stop there, because I don't want to go into the topic so far until I hear some initial reactions from you. How do you evaluate your own leadership path and your own leadership career from your different origins and your different backgrounds? Let's go back to start with Tere, if you will, and give us a perspective from you. You need to unmute your microphone. Sorry.
There we go. As you know, I've had a long career, and along the way, you don't stop and think about it. You just go through the hard times, the good times, etc. But I think Latina leaders have a lot of courage. I think courage to show up. They're motivators. They stay strong through difficult paths, as we've had in the last couple of months. I think they work very hard. I do think that, family is very important to us, as you mentioned. And we just learn to multitask. I think that, again, I think none of us sit here and say, oh, how difficult, we have it more difficult because we're doing 3 or 4 things. We just do it. And, as the Spanish saying goes, no hay que llegar primero, pero hay que saber llegar. And Latina leaders saben llegar. So.
Correct. Yeah, I agree with you. Maria, what's your perspective on this whole concept of leadership for Latinas?
I would say 2 things. One is that I agree with Tere, you just do it. But I think one thing that is important to recognize, hold on a second, let me make sure this is off. Is important to recognize is that you can't do it all at the same time. That's one of the things, learning how to sequence. So understand and making sure you have the support. What we're seeing right now in COVID-19 is the recognition, starting from Governor Newsom here in California, about how important women, his wife, mom to his 4 children, is important in making sure they're getting educated, the household is running well, et cetera, et cetera. So that I try to mentor some younger women, younger families, and just say, it's okay if sometimes you put one thing more as a priority and another thing comes second, because you're a human being, and you have X amount of time and X amount of energy. But I will say, I've had very, very hard jobs, and I decided to be a parent. My husband and I, we were in our mid-40s. And I had family members who said, why? Because they already had children. They knew something I did not know and had to experience for myself, which is being a parent is the hardest job you will ever have. And I would not miss it for the world. But understanding that these are really complex roles we have. I believe I'm a better parent because I have all these other interests and career and can give my children perspectives that they might not otherwise have. But ultimately, it's up for each person, women particularly, to decide whether the role of being a parent, a mother, is one they want to choose, and understanding that it's going to be a balance for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Maria Rivas, how do you see this?
Yeah, no, I wanted to draw from something that Tere mentioned, which is how disproportionately this crisis has impacted women. Women are caregivers. Women are often, unfortunately, burdened with the teaching part of the children. And I personally have in my global team very talented women who still have young children, and they're single moms, and they have been overburdened with essentially not just doing now a very hard job of being managers themselves to their own teams virtually, keeping those teams motivated virtually, and then on top of that, being at home with 2 elementary age kids, who you need to watch over, teach, make sure they do homework. And I honestly take my hat off to anybody juggling that multitasking, be it man or woman, but definitely, unfortunately, disproportionately, when it comes to caregiving for healthcare reasons or children, it does fall on the women. And I also want to draw on something Maria Echaveste said, which is, you cannot do it all. And, a lot of us who are high achievers, myself included, we're type A's, perfectionists. We want everything done perfectly all the time. And unfortunately, now that I have 20-something-year-old kids, no kids anymore, they're adults. And I got, knock on wood, I have to say I was able to grow in my career, but I was not completely free in sometimes during my career to be able to take some choices that I would have taken had I been single or without kids. I do have to say that, Maria, what you also mentioned, which is the support network. You need to surround yourself with support network, whatever you are, man or woman, or other, you need to have either friends or neighbors or, family, or a partner, if you're very blessed, that really helps you in your managing this duality. It is hard, and I think it is harder for women.
And Consuelo, how about you? Your balance, your spheres in interaction.
Yes, well, I think I was thinking while listening to everyone, this is always like a difficult question, because I don't have like biological children or children myself. I wasn't that I wasn't fortunate. I for that. I think a lot of times when I'm in panels where people ask, oh, do you have children? I just say no. I'm always wondering what people are thinking. Oh, she chose, not to have children and just pursue her career, and that's why, she was able to achieve all that she has. And I have had even people tell me that. But there's always, there's also personal side. I suffered through infertility for years, suffered several miscarriages, and all that very painful stuff that probably is the first time I share in a professional environment openly. Probably because it has been also very hard normally to talk about it. But I think it's important to address, that regardless if we have our own children or not, women, like we're saying, play a very fundamental role in our families, supporting with our parents, sisters, brothers, in-laws and everything else, and through our own struggles, what it has meant also, that unfortunate situation probably in my life. The way I saw it, I think I was fortunate that growing up, I remember the day when I was probably around 7th grade in Mexico, and my dad used to take me to school, and my mom used to take my brothers to school. And on the way back, I was having this conversation with my dad about what I was going to study and, all that stuff. And I remember, clearly even the road where I was when he was like, it's important for you to pursue a career, but not only like to always kind of like, what if something happens and you end up by yourself, and to be able to support yourself. But it's important also that to have that freedom as a woman, to choose, to make a choice, if you want to get married or not, if you want to stay married or not, so that it doesn't become a financial decision, And I was like, that's really strange, because back then, people would say, oh, a lot of women were still not pursuing, it wasn't like a natural choice to go to college, at least in Mexico or in my hometown. And especially to become an engineer and move, to another country and all that was like a little bit kind of like not the mainstream probably. But I think I've been very fortunate, because in a way, I think that experience or that nurturing and that implies motherhood and all that, I think we can do that throughout, in our careers also, supporting others, entrepreneurs, not only our family, that role that we play, even the decisions we make. I find it very interesting also how the countries that are being led by women prime ministers and presidents, how they have handled the COVID-19 crisis. So I think there are many ways we do it, and it is a challenge, even though I agree we just do it, but it becomes challenging, but it's also something that we have embraced and has made us even, at the end, we want to be happy, we want to make this a better place, and we want to give. And I think that's kind of what we're all doing.
Now, I'm gonna ask a question, and then who instead of going rounds, whoever wants to participate just can raise a hand, and we'll do that. Remember to mute and unmute your microphone. So we now here approach to the developing of a career leadership for women. So some people ask, what are the difficulties out there for a Latina that wants to, build a successful career and pursue a dream, pursue an objective, especially in certain areas that are difficult, like finances, for example, or maybe politics. So who wants to say answer these?
I'll take it.
Okay.
I'll start, and then I'll let. I think it goes hand in hand with what we were just talking about. I think that unfortunately, in today's world, there are still some biases in certain areas of careers, but the biases come because it's a toggle, right? Let's talk about finance. Today, you go to meetings in investment banks, and there's still few women, given that it's been 30 years. I think part of it is driven because of difficulty and the time that you have to spend in some of these areas, right? And it goes back to what we were talking about. A woman struggles between a family and a career. And a lot of these areas, I think actually going back to COVID, I think COVID is going to change that, because I think people are going to realize that you can work from home, you can work at your own pace, but there are certain careers, finance, investment banking being one of them, where you needed to be there and you needed to be present. You felt like, you had to be in the office from 7 in the morning to 12 at night because everybody else was. So the impediments, I don't think it's an outright prejudice, like, we don't want women in this area. I think it's a combination of the difficulty and the time and the conflict that we feel as women, as somebody mentioned before, when you have small children, there's a toggle. And usually you loosen that toggle, but I find that the people today, millennials and the people are younger, and in some ways smarter than we are, in the sense that if they're not willing to make the sacrifice, they're not going to take that job. So they find a way to do what they love to do without having to necessarily spend that time as you have to do as a young attorney. You know, Maria, you said you were in private practice. My daughter, who works with me, is an attorney, worked for Greenberg. You know, she worked from 8 till 12 every night. You know, it's difficult if you're a mother of babies. So I think that if you want to look at the positives of COVID coming out of it, I think it's made us look at ourselves internally, and companies to look at their stakeholders, which workers are one of them, to consider how do we get the highest productivity and level of value from these people, yet allow them to have a family, a career, be happy. And I think that's going to change the balance a little bit for Latina women, because I think some of that struggle should be taken out of the equation, I hope.
Yeah. Okay. Maria Echaveste.
May I just add a couple points? I definitely, I'm old enough, I was in the first wave of women graduating from law school, so there were very few, especially women of color, very few Latinas at corporate law firms. And now you're going to know how old I'm at, in the mid 80s, you know, 1980. But I would say the obstacle was both as a woman and as a Latina, right? So you're breaking two barriers down. And the assumptions when you walked into a courtroom, because I was a corporate litigator, of sort of, oh, you're here to bring someone the files. You couldn't possibly be the attorney who's representing a big case, right? Yeah. And I think it is, the obstacle is letting other people's assumptions about what you can do, because your name is Maria Echaveste, a woman and a Latino, somehow you're not representing a big corporate merger takeover, this, that, or big airline bankruptcies. And the advice I give to, when I speak to students and others, is simply do not let other people's perceptions of what you can do, don't accept them, don't react to them. You know what you can do. You know your skills and talent. Go do it, right? And so I think that having that confidence, it is sometimes, you know, we all have our moments of weakness, wondering, can I really be Deputy Chief of Staff to the President of the United States? And my husband, God bless him, who actually had worked, Christopher Edley had actually worked in the Carter White House, was very supportive. He said, you know what? You've earned the job. You've got, and everyone, you know, George Stephanopoulos, he was just an aide to Dick Gephardt. You know, everybody starts somewhere, and so you've earned it. So I'll just stop there. But
I want to add to what you and Tere said, which frames this next comment, and I want to take the question out of the table, because it's still Maria, Rivas, and Consuelo. But is there any set of skills that Latinas need to pay more attention to in the pursuing of a career or a leadership career? And is there any big thing that you need to sacrifice in order to develop that career? Maria Rivas.
Yeah, no, I wanted to just say that I think that definitely what Maria Echaveste mentioned, which is people underestimate you. Sometimes, you know, unfortunately, that will be part of, you know, the obstacles, and there are conscious and unconscious biases. And Consuelo and I are both in the sciences. I'm in the medical life sciences, and Consuelo, you're more in the life, you know, now evolved even further from engineering and life sciences yourself. But in any case, in our lives in science, there's enormous obstacles for women because there's a lot of conscious and unconscious bias. Unfortunately, journals, scientific journals, academia, they happen to be very male-dominated and present certain glass ceilings for women who want to have tenure or publish their work, get research grants, etc. In any case, I wanted to say that in terms of what to watch for, I would just say that, you know, I I wouldn't advise anybody to essentially stop doing something. I wouldn't advise people to not be genuine or authentic. People need to feel that, you know, the women listening to this, please feel authentic in whatever you do. Nothing is worth, in my opinion, sacrificing authenticity. It will come across, and eventually the right job fit will come, and the right opportunity for leadership in that job. I think one of the key things to watch for is communication style, because in general, at least Latinos in general, I mean, no matter Latinx, you know, we are all very expressive. We are, you know, some of us are very demonstrative, and depending on the culture, you know, again, in the academic, scientific, you know, hallways, you know, that may be, you know, misrepresented as perhaps lack of, you know, rationality and logic and scientific method. So at least in my world, you know, I do need to watch the audience carefully and communicate accordingly. I will stop there. Consuelo, I'm sure you have more to say on that. A lot of the
Yes, well, I have also experienced kind of what you were saying. I was in a meeting, actually it was in Europe last year, and it was, I think, in northern Italy. I was in Milan in a room with other venture capitalists. And there were some investors in funds that they assumed, I noticed, but then I verified, they were assuming that I was the assistant of someone else, yeah? And then when I sat at the table and I got to answer some of the questions of one of those investors, he was like, "Oh, so you're not his assistant?" You know, I'm like, no, I have my own firm. And then but I did notice that this person couldn't get his mind out of trying to figure me out, which was very distracting at that moment, you know, like, how come you're an engineer? How come you have these masters? Oh, don't tell me you have these. And oh, not even I have, you know, a master. And I was like, okay, so you're the point of reference now. And sometimes, you know, that you're in situations that can be, you know, I think it's kind of natural with our biases that we all have, unconscious and subconscious, that we try to put people in a box, you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of, you're talking and people are trying to figure you out. And if you don't fit in something, then it becomes kind of a challenging meeting, you know, for others. But I think it is important, I agree, to be very authentic and not to try to fit in what someone is trying to make you, you know, like that becomes very difficult. And at the end, you want to achieve what makes you happy, what makes you thrive, and it's not what other people are trying to do for you. You know, I think it is important for us to also, I think I learned at a very young age not to wait for someone to give me something, you know. So it's either I provide it and I look for it to obtain it, or if there are difficulties like we see nowadays, you know, with Black Lives Matter and civil rights movement right now, that you go and demand and create those things that we need. You know, we're not going to expect others to give them to us. So I think that is also an important learning, and also to see more Latinas in science. Not when people say, anyone saying that we're not good in math, women are not good in math, that's not true. You know, so that is important.
Now, in that sense, well, some people say that the leaders are those who convert difficulties into opportunities, right? And I'm just the situation that you were describing. I'm sure all of you have passed through a situation in which you are feeling like you are not, you know, being appreciated or judged fairly, and maybe you have had to use that situation in your advantage to advance. Is that, you know, a correct assessment or something that has happened to any of you? Maria Rivas?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, the most extreme one was a job, a company that I was working for that had over time developed or evolved to a different kind of culture and priorities that didn't really align with my particular sets of value, particularly in the life sciences. And in that case, I just decided to look for another job, and that gave me actually a broader, more interesting role that allowed me to continue to grow in my career. So, you know, sometimes if the culture just doesn't fit, if the company or the job opportunities are not appropriate, you know, that is the best outcome. But on other cases, you know, I was able to see a gap in the way our global operations worked, and I proposed to look at the issue with a cross-functional team, and that got me recognition that later allowed me to then step up to a next role. So yeah, you always have to look for these opportunities. You know, they can be your catapult.
Tere.
I think that, you know, it's been said before. I mean, I think any leader, true leader, has gone through very difficult situations. I mean, that's part of how you become a leader. I know when I started my money management firm in '85, you know, I was one of few Latina, I think at the time, the only Latina female that had a money management firm. And, you know, we competed with all the big fixed income firms, PIMCO and whatever. And we had many difficult moments. Was never, you know, we were very successful at the end, but it's never a straight line, right? And I think you learn from those situations. I think that things that are important is that, you know, it takes a team. You're not going to do it alone. You have to respect and always support your team. I think integrity, and I think whatever business you're in or company you're in, you know, you have to value your stakeholders. So your customer, your client, you know, always should come first. In the investment business like we are, we're still in today. I mean, in difficult times, you have to be there for your clients, and the client has to be always, always first. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. But going back to the question, I think being a leader allows you to, you're going to have landmines, you're going to have very difficult moments, you're going to have times when people doubt you, when they say, well, how can a Latina manage money for the city of New York? And, you know, again, you show them. It doesn't, like somebody, I think Maria just said, it doesn't come to you. You have to go to it. You just have, sometimes you have to work harder, but that's just the way it is. And I think that's what makes a leader.
Okay. Now, what in times of COVID-19, what part of your industry or your company, Tere, could you mute your?
Oh, sorry.
Because I think that's the one that when it's unmuted gives us problems. Okay, so in terms of this pandemic that we just lived and we are still living, what has been the main transformation in your industries, in your businesses, in your own, you know, leadership roles that you have noticed? For example, I know, is it true that corporations are becoming more humanistic centered than profitable centered? Is that true? Is not true? For example, the healthcare industry, the medical research all area, I mean, they've been in the center of all these gigantic hurricane of things. And also the social projects for you, Maria Echaveste, who are, you know, being affected and as somehow influenced. So how do you see from your own perspectives the transformations that we've been seeing? We cannot hear you. There's something in your microphone or.
I'm on the phone,
okay.
Sorry. So
right.
I forgot to unmute that one too. As I said, I worked at the Opportunities Institute as president and CEO. Our job is to try to make system-wide changes. What COVID-19 has done is we already, those of us in this space, understood the inequities in education and all those things. But COVID-19 has laid it bare in such a profound way that, and now with Black Lives Matter, with the real, what I call the racial reckoning that is going on in this country, that is long overdue, it presents for me and for our sphere a real opportunity, because the other thing that's happening is we have a massive economic challenge. there will be school districts, cities going bankrupt. The most vulnerable, for example, in the state of, if you look across the country, the great number of Black and brown children are the ones who are in public education. And if we have this financial reckoning, we are going to hurt our country's future because we will not educate the future. And so this is an opportunity for cities and counties and states to really take a look, like, how do we reimagine education? How do we reimagine the delivery of services and support to children? Everybody's talking about the mental health crisis that COVID-19, well, we had a mental health crisis before. When you look at who's in juvenile hall in Alameda County, something like 70% of those young people have mental and emotional issues that went unaddressed, and they get caught up in the prison system. So to me, I'm actually very optimistic that this crisis will give us an opportunity to take on these very big structural systemic issues.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Maria Rivas?
Yeah, no, if I can comment, I mean, definitely the healthcare and life sciences industries have been at the epicenter of just reinventing themselves on a twist, in a sharp pivot. So definitely, at least from the pharmaceutical environment, you know, what I have seen that has dramatically changed is the level of collaboration that was immediately set up, enabled by technology, to be able to collaborate even across, you know, in more ways than previously, you know, where mergers or you know, marketing and commercialization agreements, you know, beyond that, I mean, just research collaboration, sharing open books of potential medications that can help, and actually then engaging with government and regulatory organizations like the World Health Organization, National Institutes of Health, and so on, to investigate, to study these very quickly and set up a whole machinery, which usually takes months to years, to try to get the quickest way to find something that can help, be it a vaccine or a medication. And many companies have really come to the call, donations, you know, of supplies. And what has been very interesting from an operations perspective of the company that I was able to you know, that I'm currently a leader in, is just how it really turned all of us as leaders quickly to focus on the most essential things to ensure continuity. We have an obligation to make sure that our medicines still make it to the patients, you know, so we need to make sure our supply chains, our production lines, you know, while taking care of our employees as well, right? And nurturing them and providing for them a safety net while their world is being disrupted. And I'm talking about global operations, which we were very blessed to start watching and learn from when our China operations became extremely disrupted. And then as the wave of the pandemic moved westward, we were able to then have those lessons learned from China and apply to our European operations. And then now we're unfortunately seeing that played out in the US. Yeah. But it required leaders to really focus on the essentials, cut the red tape. Our processes became more nimble, and we leveraged technology much more. So that those all provide very valuable lessons for sustainability future-wise and faster and more agile operations.
Tere, do you have a perspective on how the pandemic has changed your industry and your own company and leadership?
I think it's been well said. I think one of the ways is it's made you focus more, not strongly, more very, very focused on your clients and your employees, the stakeholders. I think to the point that was just made, I think it's made us be more productive. And I think to the point that was made before about how COVID has hit unevenly across economic lines, it continues to make, you know, Jorge, I've always been focused on education because I think education is such an important part. And I think I sit on a board of a public company, and, you know, all these companies have come out with very nice letters and a lot of money. And what I hope we don't miss this time around Maria's point is that it's a three-stool. You know, it takes money, it takes education, it takes mentoring. So money alone won't do it. And I hope companies are serious enough to really get involved and do the mentoring and the educational part, because I think that will go a long way to solving some of the inequities in our world. So again, I think the epidemic has made us all really focus internally. You know, we've seen a lot of disease, a lot of death, a lot of economic deprivation that has happened in just a few months. And I think it's made us to focus internally and really focus on the things that are important to our companies, to our employees, and to our clients, and to really making a better world so we can get rid of some of the inequities.
Mm-hmm. Now we have some questions from the attendants. Before letting Consuelo take his point, I just want to give the microphone to Jimena, and then we'll come back for the last 5 minutes of the webinar to ask you a final question. But Jimena, do we have any questions that we need to provide to the panelists? And you don't have to respond all the questions. Just if you feel that you want to answer that question, go ahead.
Hi. So yes, we have. Well, actually, there's one comment. Someone says how many times Latinos haven't built networks, connection needed to find those opportunities in the corporate world to build their career at a young age. Does anyone have any comment about that?
I'll make a comment. Can you repeat the question just to make sure I have it right?
Well, it wasn't really a question. It was more of a comment of how some younger professionals feel that there's a lack of networking when it comes to building a career in the corporate world.
It's so important. And you know, it's funny, as we were having this talk today, I was so impressed with the three women on the panel with myself. And I've been in this business a long time, and I didn't know any of them. And I think that networking is critical at any stage in your career, but particularly when you're starting out, because I think one thing that we Latinos and Latinas in particular, I think are very willing to help. I mean, we didn't get here with a lot of people helping us, Jorge included, always there, always showcasing us, always. So I think networking is a must, and you know, depending your industry and where you live, you know, you need to find out where it is. And if you can find one person that can mentor you, and let me spend 5 minutes, and this is important to me, 2 minutes. Latinas need that mentoring for one reason. We as women we don't have the same self-image that a lot of the men do, okay? And we develop that much later in our career. And it's so important to feel good about ourselves, to know that we can do it. And there's nobody better than to give you that confidence that somebody who's been down that road before. So self-confidence is critical in your career. And again, we women and we Latinas develop it much later. If we had it at 20 or 30, we own the world. So I think network, find somebody that's been there who can help you, and it will go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Maria Echaveste, you wanted to say something.
I was going to say it's absolutely the importance of networks. My husband is African American, and one of the things I've observed over the years, he's second generation Harvard Law. Okay, that tells you, you know, his father was the first African American at Ford Foundation. Segregation created a network among the African American community of professionals because other barriers stopped them from, right? We as Latinos don't know each other. We don't know business, we don't know the media people, those of us in politics. So I welcome efforts like this of letting us connect, because we need those connections. Social capital is as important as financial capital when you're trying to improve opportunities for our community, which continues to lower levels of education, lower levels of wealth, lower levels of health, all those things. So yes, social capital, very important.
All right. Anyone else wants to say something on that comment? Okay, Jimena, do we have anything else?
So based on that, what would you say would be a good start to find a mentor? How or where?
I think you by getting involved in organizations inside your job, but also outside. I'm very involved in Cristo Rey schools, which provides high school for underprivileged, the lowest level of underprivileged children, 4 years of prep school. And I have things for young professionals on my house, and people come in all sorts of different professions and they meet there and they end up doing business together or becoming friends. So don't limit it just to your profession but your interests that you have. You know, ask friends of friends, ask your parents' friends, ask, you know, just say, hey, I want to get coffee to learn more about this, or, you know, it doesn't have to be in your area of expertise or career. So I would say, you know, it's wide open.
All right. Anyone else wants to make a comment on that? Okay. Now, I want to ask a last question that I want to make it both serious and also a little bit of the anecdotal side, because when I remember when we started this lockdown and the pandemic in the mid-March, I remember we had internally here in the magazine a meeting and say, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do best? And how are we going to function? And we have never worked remote. So it was a shock for us. So I want to ask you, what for you, what has been the thing that you have loved the most of having to be able to go through the pandemic and the lockdown and all these, and what has been that you have hated the most in this quarantine and this crisis and this pandemic? So I would like the four of you to participate in this question because it demonstrates a lot of character and defines you. So we start with Tere.
Okay, well, the thing I've loved the most is the ability to spend a lot of time with my family. We quarantined, but my children live close by, and we had dinner almost every night with my grandkids and my children, and I just love that. What I hated the most is, again, the people who truly suffered through this, both from a health and from an economic perspective. And even though the markets have bounced back and et cetera, we haven't seen the end of that. I think, you know, a lot of people are unemployed, a lot of people don't have health insurance, and that's what I hate most about it. I just think that, as somebody said, good should come out of it. We should focus on that. But so I love the family time, but I hate the situation that it created for many people, both emotionally, from a health perspective and an economic perspective.
Okay. Should we go with Maria Rivas?
Sure. What I've loved the most is that my husband hasn't had to commute for work. We have a telecommuting arrangement. That was the only way I could continue to grow in the pharmaceutical environment. So he practices law in Puerto Rico and I work in the US. And he comes every other week. And now we've been 3 months quarantined together, and that was a lot of fun. He may have a different view, but at least it was good to me. The one thing that frustrated me is that we need more women in our U.S. government, and we need more Latina women in the U.S. government. Thank you.
Of course. Maria Echaveste. No, still we can hear you.
Different ones, sorry.
All right.
Two different mutings. Love is probably too strong. I love the fact that actually I was prepared for sheltering in place because I knit. So I have a ton of yarn. I've had more time to knit.
Yeah.
Doing all the Zoom calls, if you notice, I'm always paying attention. So it's been good, and I, get my cooking skills up. But what I hate the most is what Tere said. Just the unequal nature of how this we're fortunate, those of us who can work from home remotely, right? And keep bringing a paycheck home. The millions of people and the disruption and the impact. And then when you think of the Latino community, suddenly we're essential. Suddenly farm workers are essential, right? Yeah, because you're not going to eat without us. So I just hope that we don't lose sight of this. You know, the curtain has been torn, and now we understand how society works, and we are really all in it together.
Mm-hmm. All right. And Consuelo.
Yeah, probably being able to eat at home every day and cook our own meals and not having to eat at restaurants and all over the place. I think it has been a good part, and also having more time to read, probably with less commuting and just not being able to see a lot of friends and doing more social stuff. So spending more time kind of also doing all that. And probably what I have disliked the most has been the fact that we're experiencing a very big crisis, all of us at the same time, yeah, and not in the same way, of course. And that unfortunately the less privileged or are suffering way more, like it normally happens, and it's always repetitive, and there tends to be more selfishness also among people that are more privileged, you know, thinking, again, these bubbles, you know, this is our bubble, and complaining about what's happening in our immediate space while there's so much struggle outside. And we're very privileged, like working from home. Yes, it's bad that we cannot hug someone, we cannot see friends. I would just like, you know, love to be able to have a coffee with a friend, you know, it doesn't matter where, that would be great. But there are people that are having way more struggles. I mean, this is nothing, in my opinion, to someone that, even people working at, you know, having their relatives become ill and not having, losing their jobs, not having healthcare insurance, not having the support of family, having kids at home, not having enough space to the schooling. They don't have even computers or the internet to be doing all this schooling. And, you know, so many challenges, you know, that many of us that are privileged think that our lives have been so disrupted. Yes, it is true. But it's nothing in comparison to what has happened.
Yeah, I got the feeling that as every single crisis, it hits everyone, and depending on the equipment or the situation where you are, you will be hit you know, worst or less worst. But I think the thing is, how are we going to avoid these from happening, specifically more for our community, right? For Latinos in the future. So, well, I want to thank you, all of you. I will give you just a final comment. If you want to do comment something, perhaps giving an advice to all of those Latinas, you know, watching us and reading the magazine. I know many of you are role models and that follow you. And I think in the Latino community, we have a big hunger of success, and a big hunger of being recognized, and a big hunger of participating and being someone and something. So last round of messages, and we'll start back with Tere, and then we'll end with Consuelo.
Jorge, first of all, thank you for putting this panel together, and thank you for all the years that you have been supporting Latina leaders and always standing behind us and showcasing us. My best advice is, don't let anybody tell you you can't do something. Be true to yourself. Integrity is non-negotiable. And if you follow those rules, you're going to get ahead. So.
All right.
Thank you again.
Maria Echaveste.
Gracias. Thank you for the opportunity to meet these great women. I look forward to connecting someone across in San Francisco like Consuelo. But I would just simply say this was a real opportunity to share stories, and I have to echo what Betty says. It really, dream big, and never be afraid to ask someone for help. I think that sometimes we feel like we have to do it all by ourselves and figure it out by ourselves. No, there's probably someone who's walked in your shoes before. Ask them for advice. Most of us are always willing to give it, even when not asked. So thank you.
That's great. Maria Rivas.
Yeah, no, thank you again for the invitation. It was delightful to be part of this distinguished panel. And I also wanted to just say one word. In Spanish, it's easy. It's cuídate. Cuídate means take care of yourselves, because if you don't take care of yourselves, you won't be able to achieve all you can be. So always take care of your own mental, physical health state of being.
That's a great advice. Thank you. And Consuelo.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me in the panel. It has been wonderful to get to know or learn a little bit about all the panelists, and look forward to connecting and building, that network and learning more about each of you. And I think a piece of advice is to get to know yourself very well, and know what is it that you want to pursue in life, what makes you happy, and pursue your dreams, and not let anything stop you. There is always a way. I think that instead of, there are going to be obstacles along the way, but there's always a way how to make those obstacles part of the path that will get you to achieving your dreams.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much to all of you for giving your time, which is the most precious thing that we all have. And we really appreciate that. We are proud of your leadership. Please keep doing what you are doing. Keep inspiring other people. That's what we need in our community to build and keep building every day more and more leaders. And we're here at Latino Leaders Magazine. We really thank you. Thank you for our sponsor, Cito Capital, which is a firm that leads and led by women also. So we're very proud of that. Thank you very much for that support. And we will keep in touch for further things in the magazine. But in the meantime, have a great rest of the week. And thank you to everyone who watched this live panel. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.